don't know what the night standing on guard has done for me, but it's done something for me that I think is good.
Yeah.
And so what do we want to put there? What do we want to hang on the walls of our children's minds?
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Memoria Press.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Aboud, and I am here with Tanya and Martin, familiar voices. And we've got a returning voice with us, Mr. Kyle Janke. Kyle,
Hello.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Kyle teaches here at Highlands Latin School and at Memoria College. You teach classical studies and literature.
That's right.
And coming up, you are once again teaching some discussion at our annual conference.
Mm-hmm.
Your messages are quite packed. Usually there's people standing, people waiting to get in. So you are a sought after speaker. You also, don't want to forget this, you are the author of our textbook, The Classical History of Art, which covers art and architecture.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And on top of all of that, Kyle, you are the perfect person to sit down with us today because we are talking about the visual arts and why it matters that it makes its way into curriculum for our students.
Excellent. Can't wait.
Yeah. Well, we usually talk about what we're reading. Kyle, I'm going to give you a minute to think about it, but you guys always know.
Oh, Martin doesn't. Do you today? Have you thought about it?
Well, yeah. I'm still working on Mythology by Edith Hamilton, and seeing these parallels to Christianity in there that are just amazing. In the Prometheus story, for example, just really amazing. Also, I saw this poem recently by W.H. Auden, and I thought I'm gonna buy some book of poetry from Auden. But this was the poem. This was the poem that was so interesting to me. Just very short. It's from The Cave of Meaning. God may reduce you on Judgment Day to tears of shame, reciting by heart the poems you would have written had your life been good.
Well, there's a downer to start with.
Just throw this out there for general uplift. No, but it's a really interesting thought. A warning.
I don't know if I'm ready for that thought
Yeah, I
right
think
now.
it's a warning.
Did that move you in a particular way?
I just thought that was. It's just an amazing use of words. That's what makes poetry so interesting. Is that, and the thing with Auden is he uses simple words. It's not very complicated. He uses almost regular language in his poetry, and I just thought if you count up the number of words there's not many, and the thought that was expressed in those few words, I think is just.
You're
incredible.
a good reader too.
What do you mean?
You read it well.
Oh, well, yeah, you have to read poetry well. Yeah. Otherwise, that just doesn't sound good.
Yeah. Agreed.
Like that's what the students for when they recite in the classroom, and it's very chanty, very sing-songy, and you have to really work on that.
Yeah.
Well, also in that particular poem, if I try to think, if I was trying to write a poem, where would I end the line? And you look at a poem like that, and it's 7 lines long. But I always went, why did he end it with that word? Why didn't he put the first word from the next line at the end of the previous line? I don't know what rule you would follow.
Well, there are rules for that.
There are some, but I'm not sure that in some kinds of poetry, it's just a judgment call.
Yeah.
Authors.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Tanya?
I'm reading Huck Finn. And then I'm going to read James, the modern Jim's point of view. This is Catherine in HR told me she was going to read James, which is Jim's written from Jim's perspective, totally modern take on the Huckleberry Finn story. And I said, well, you should read Huckleberry Finn.
Had she read
first? She had read it, but it's been years. And me too. And it had been years. So I'm about halfway through Huckleberry Finn, and then I'm going to read James. She's finished with Huck Finn and has moved on to James. So we'll see. But I am thoroughly enjoying Huckleberry Finn again. It is so funny.
Yeah.
It is so funny. There's so much humor in that book. Yes. Because just his perspective
Mhm.
on life and salvation and
Mhm.
so many other things.
Mhm.
It's
Well, I've
just-
always been sort of tempted to dislike Twain because
Really?
he's such an ironist.
yes.
And
Yes.
And in a way, I mean, irony can be corruptive in literature, but he's so good, and he gets down to
well, and using it, in a 13 or 14-year-old boy
yeah,
then softens it.
because if you've ever raised boys and they become 13 years old, that's what happens,
Mhm.
But I just think he's a great writer, he's a great thinker, he sees into human beings. And so, however ironical he can be, and however you want to say, well, that's kind of a literary solvent in some ways, but he's made it into an art form. It's good.
How about you, Kyle?
Yeah. Well, two things. So on my long commute to work over the river and through the woods, I've been listening to Winston Churchill's The River War.
I want to read that.
It's very good. It's very well written. He's
Well,
just
goes without saying.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm blown away by the descriptive passages and the way he carries action so well. It's very good. So I'm enjoying that a lot, and that's been a good one to listen to.
Okay.
Good narrator.
Yeah. I found a decent narrator. Yeah.
I'm looking for a good Moby Dick narrator
Ooh, I
I
don't
think
have recommendations.
I think the one
because I
listened
have to read Moby Dick.
You get to.
I get
You
to read
yes.
Moby Dick.
Mhm.
We'll see if it's get or half. Here we go again.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of books that Churchill wrote that nobody talks about. The River War is one of them, and there's one about
Mhm.
I can't remember the name of it. His experience in South Africa,
I don't know.
and then there's another one about his youth or something. I can't remember but they're apparently all supposed to be really good.
Yeah.
The River War was just another publisher, a very good publisher, just recently put that out.
Okay,
Talk
yeah.
about a person of energy.
Oh
Mhm.
gosh.
Yeah.
And the influence that he had. I was just reading a book about World War I, and I didn't know the extent of his involvement in World War I. What a great figure he was so consequential for
Yes.
history in the 20th century. It's not just
Mhm.
World War II.
But he was also an artist
Yes.
and an author.
Mhm.
And what do you call somebody who recites copious amounts of poetry?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay, well,
Recitator.
he was a
There you go.
I just remember
Oh.
one thing he told a visitor when he raised pigs on his
and
estate.
a farmer.
Yeah, and so he went out and he was extolling the virtue of pigs, and he said, dogs look up to us, and cats look down on us, but pigs consider us equals.
We'll think about that next time I have a pork chop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Then who wins?
Yeah. No, but then I haven't started reading it yet, but I've got on the shelf next up is Shusaku Endo's The Samurai.
Ooh.
So he's most known for Silence, which I haven't read, and I feel like I've heard so much about it, and I know so much about it that I don't know. If I love The Samurai, then I'll probably move on to Silence and read that too. But I had a student this year, she just graduated, that was just raving about his writing and raving about this book in particular. And so I told her that, all right, I'll make that one of my summer reads.
Yeah, you had to read it at that point.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So, on the subject of literature, everybody who listens to this probably already knows my absolute disdain for The Great Gatsby, and how many times I think since we've been doing this podcast, I've probably read it at least twice, just trying to see what everybody sees in it. And I just couldn't do it. So then our upper school lit teachers were reading it together. So I had to read it again for the fourth time. And I left early that day. And then Kyle told me with a smirk on his face that The Great Gatsby was the choice. And I thought, yeah, you did that after I left, because I would have voted it down. So I read it for the fourth time, doing my due diligence, because I'm a rule follower. And then we had the conversation about it. And I told Kyle after that he had convinced me that The Great Gatsby is worthy of being a great American novel, not the great American, but a great American novel.
Will you accept that, Kyle?
I will accept that.
Yes.
Yeah, we got to meet in the middle somewhere.
That all of the angst that I have put on Kyle over his love of that book is gone, and now I totally agree with him that it's a great novel. And when I told him, he said, "Oh no, this isn't enough. I need it. I need this to be public." And so I'm making it public. I was wrong. Kyle was right. Now can we move on?
See, I don't have angst when you disagree with me about literature. I just mark it off to bad taste.
Yeah. Of course you did. Well, Kyle kept trying. He did keep trying. And he did find, it was just that one thing that you said. You know, when Jennifer, one of us, said, why would we, this is so negative. Why would we put this in front of high schoolers? And you said, because we not only want literature to teach them how to live, but literature can also teach them how not to live. And that for me was the turning point. I had a whole different appreciation for that novel at that point.
The producers need to title the show Tanya's Confession.
So now, that's right. And now I need to read, I guess, try Wuthering Heights again, because that's another one that Kyle and I are in total disagreement on. And so we're committed, the upper school lit teachers are committed to read Moby Dick and attend his Wednesday book group at teacher training at the Memorial National Conference this year. So please join us, and we'll see how I feel about Moby Dick.
Yeah, well, let me just then publicly say that though it has been a burden, a cross to bear over the years, I formally accept your apology.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
And we're glad to have you on the team.
Well, thank you so much. But you could have formally accepted my apology without microphones. But you chose not to.
It's just all the sweeter.
Oh, I know. I mean, I have really given him a hard time over the years. It's been many years.
That's funny. And so now maybe in a couple months we'll be at the same.
We could be at the same table.
Part 2.
Well, I haven't said
I'm for making it a regular feature of the show.
A segment.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you would be thrilled with that. And you're loving this moment more than you should be as a good Christian man.
I haven't felt this good in a long time.
But I haven't said anything negative about Moby Dick because I haven't read it. So we'll see. My mind is open.
Good.
Funny.
But I don't want to read it.
Yeah.
Reluctant.
I'm not a fish person, and I'm not a water person. I'm not a boat person.
Yeah, Horatius. Oh, yeah, we know.
Horatio Hornblower.
Horatio. Yes, you're right.
I was like, Horatius? Well,
Horatio
I mean, he could have drowned in all that armor.
There's a little time in chapter 1 when Melville's not talking about the ocean. So you can enjoy that.
Maybe I will. And I am somebody did say I should get the audiobook and just on my commute, just get through the fish stuff.
She just said get through the fish stuff.
Yeah. That's all right.
We'll see.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Maybe I'll love the fish stuff, but nobody does.
I do. Yeah.
Are you surprised?
We'll bring you back on.
Yeah.
And we'll do this again about Moby Dick.
Yeah, Moby Dick is one of the books that Andrew Pudewa and I will be debating.
Have you read it?
Oh,
recently?
yeah, I used to teach it. Well, not recently. I used to teach it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you like the fish stuff? Those chapters of fish that everybody talks about?
I think I read when I've read it several times actually, but I read those and I think there is some significance here to this.
Well, you'll have to come Wednesday to his book.
And I don't always see it, but I sometimes do. And I think it's just he's got deeply symbolic writing.
Yeah.
What do I need to know before I read the fish stuff?
It's all there for a reason.
And when you mean, just so people know, I mean, you're talking about like, they talk about the whale's head. They go into that's where they get like a kind of an oil that's really expensive. And they're going down into the brain. And it's all this very...
Tashigo falls in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
No, so it's all purposeful. It's all there for a reason. And we know this, one, because it's not exhaustive. So he doesn't tell you everything that there is to know
So
about
he's
whaling. He tells you
chosen.
what he wants you to know. And he invents things about whaling. So there's a specific moment where Melville has added a footnote to his own text saying, this is not a thing that actually happens in the whaling industry. But on the Pequod, on his fictional ship, it happened on this ship.
Oh,
So that's him.
That's kinda fun.
He's crafted his own symbol as an author to say, to communicate some other point to the reader. So
okay.
we'll
I
look for
think
that,
it's a
yeah.
really brilliant book. And when you've read it once and you the first time you read it, you're going through and you're not getting the significance of a whole lot of things. And so your next journey through, you stop and you think because you know the whole now, and you're going through the parts, and you can investigate that one thing. What is he trying to say here? And I just think it's a fabulous book.
Yeah,
Have you read East of Eden?
I have. Yeah.
Okay.
I like. Yep.
That
Time
is my favorite recent book that I've
Yeah.
read over the past few years.
That's very good. That
Sorry,
is,
Beck.
yeah. I mean, Melville is more symbolic in scope, and he's constructing a symbolic, what would you say, facade, almost like he's building a building. I think Hawthorne writes that way too. Whereas East of Eden, Steinbeck is more like the saga, like the long form story.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
good and evil and choices people make.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
More people oriented.
Yeah. Yeah.
Than a man on a boat.
Which
And
we
with
know
a
how
whale.
you feel about
Yeah.
that.
Well, we'll see.
Well, moving along, we are back to listener questions. We've gotten a lot of them recently, which is fantastic. If you have any questions, you can email podcast@memoriapress.com. Today is not exactly a question though, but we did want to highlight one of our listeners, Clifton, wrote us, and he was explaining that he has a couple audiobook recommendations, which is perfect because he's like, you guys talk about audiobooks, so I thought I'd recommend some, which is perfect because we do. We have even you, a couple of us have mentioned them.
Yes.
So the first narrator he recommends is a gentleman named David Clark, and Clifton says he's a solid British narrator and does an amazing job at all sorts of European accents. And if you've ever read a book with accents, you know it is very important to have your audiobook differentiate. It just makes it so much more enjoyable. And that narrator, David Clark, has done Sherlock Holmes, The Count of Monte Cristo, a lot of good ones. So I haven't listened to it, but Clifton says it's great. And he also recommends I guess it's maybe a channel on YouTube called Down to Sleep for children, and it's bedtime stories. And he says the narration is great.
That's nice.
I know. So there are a couple tips for any of you who are looking for some fresh audiobooks with great narrators.
Yeah, and I was just talking to somebody today about, it was a student with college about Dickens, and she was having trouble with one of Dickens' books, and it was Hard Times.
Oh.
And I suggested to her that she listen to it because you need to hear, there are different accents in there, and you need a British narrator to voice those because it really brings the nature of the characters out. And I gave her the names of two readers who are just both absolutely fabulous. One is David Timpson, and the other is Martin Jarvis.
Oh, he did Jeeves. Did he do Jeeves?
Yes, he did Jeeves too. Yeah, because there's also a humor that just underneath the surface in all of Dickens' writing, and particularly Martin Jarvis, you can hear the humor behind, just waiting to come out. Right, so you need a reader like
He's
that.
very good.
Yes, yes.
And Tanya, you had not a listener question, but
No, but I've got this interesting email. So I was at the FPEA Orlando homeschool convention, and this wonderful woman came up who has completed her homeschooling of her children now. But she told us that she had in her inbox that she had saved since 2006 an email that Cheryl Lowe sent her. So she emailed Cheryl in 2006 and said she had 4 sons. She felt like she was falling behind. Her oldest was a first grader, I think, at this point. She said, I feel as though we hurry through the day. At night, I'm stressed and guilt-laden with the feeling that I've neglected my younger sons to help my first grader get through everything. How do I put into practice the principles I read about in your magazine and on your website? And Cheryl wrote her back, and she kept it. And she just said, since your oldest is in first grade, you can relax a bit. You are not behind. We push way too much on children today, and they hardly have time to absorb or enjoy it. All we do in K-2 is focus on reading, printing, and arithmetic. Well, now it's also cursive. But at this point, in 2006, we hadn't done cursive in first grade. And then she goes on to give her, a kind of a list of things that we did, because we didn't have our curriculum developed at this point, of things that we do at Highlands Latin School. And I just thought it was charming. And I'm just so thankful to Abby for coming up to us, for telling us about this email, and for telling us, she says, I loved the Memoria Press resources I used while homeschooling, and every Memoria Press representative I've ever interacted with has been an absolute encouragement. You all are the real deal. Keep up the good fight. And I just wanted to just do a shout out to our CSRs who have worked so hard, especially this past couple of weeks as free shipping ended. And it's been crazy. It's been absolutely crazy. And they do just an amazing job. And I just wanted to brag on them for a minute and to thank Abby for her recognition of how hard they work. And they really do care, and they really do want to do the best that they can for people and help them educate their children.
It's fantastic. Since 2006. Wow. So almost 20 years.
Yes. Wow. Where were we?
2006?
We weren't at Crescent Hill yet, I don't think.
I don't know where we were. They moved us around a lot back then.
Well, moving right along, Kyle, like I said at the top of the show, you wrote a classical history of art. And I think it's safe to say that you feel like the visual arts, painting, architecture, sculpture are essential to a classical education.
Yes.
But when we say visual arts, what are we including exactly? Is it certain works, certain time periods? Can you just orient us to the subject?
Yeah, sure. Yes. I mean, visual arts, as far as I'm concerned in the guide that I wrote, I'm thinking about sculpture, painting, and architecture. And more specifically than that this is slightly forced, perhaps, but I think it is helpful to a student to think of it this way, that in the ancient world, we're focusing on sculpture. So with the Greeks and the Romans, sculpture. When we get into Christian art, so medieval art, we're focusing on architecture with the Gothic cathedral being central. And then as we transition into the Renaissance, which is, of course, that's the combination of the Christian and the classical world, we're focusing on painting. And painting takes us into the modern era, which I think there's some interesting things to observe about that. So, so it's sculpture and then architecture and painting. And that really spans, the history of Western art. And I suppose, visual art being, if music is an art form that you hear, then visual art is an art form that you see, right? It communicates to the eyes.
So now you could include photography as well.
Yeah. I would include
for
photography.
modern art, modern visual art.
Yeah, certainly.
And you spend a great deal of time helping students to study these pieces. Why is it so formative to them? Yeah,
that's a good question. And before I answer that, I just want to speak to how much time I think is appropriate.
Sure.
I've written into the guide, and I do this in the class that I teach as well, a master copy assignment that I require of the students, which is, they sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and an image of a famous work of art, and then they do the best that they can with their own hand, with their own pencil, to reproduce that master work. And of course, the goal is not that they should produce a good drawing. You know, if they're doing a master copy of a Da Vinci painting, they're not going to draw as well as Da Vinci can, right? So the goal then is simply to get them. It's the best way that I've found to get a student to really look at a single work of art for, the necessary extended period of time to really get what that work of art is doing.
That forces them to.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, you do that in writing, right? You have students like write a poem out themselves. It does. It's the same principle. It sounds like.
Yeah, and it's formative. I think art really is. It's so often in an academic setting, we're engaging with the intellect, we're engaging with the mind. Art really does engage with the heart. It accesses the emotions. It moves the student, or it should move a student. And of course, I think that takes time to develop. I guess we call it the ability to be moved by great art. That takes time. But it's worth taking that time to incorporate that part of the human being, that part of us that feels and is moved by beauty. Yeah.
And as this is for anybody too, what are you hoping students walk away with? Not just the formation of their hearts, but what are you hoping after that project in particular that you talked about, or even after finishing your class, or if they do, because you can do the classical history of art at home.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I really, the intention is that students should be able to have an intelligent, that is knowledgeable and earnest conversation about any work of art that they encounter, whether that is classical art, whether they're traveling, they're seeing, the great works in Rome or Florence or whatever, right? Or if they're in a contemporary modern art museum, they should be able to converse, to have a conversation about what they're looking at, what they're seeing. And so I want to give them in class the means by which to do that, both the historical knowledge of, how that work of art responds to a conversation or speaks into a conversation that already exists, in Western art. And then also on the more, questions like design and composition and what has the artist done to put this piece together, and to communicate, how has the artist approached his subject in such a way that communicates meaning to the viewer? I want them to be able to identify those aspects as well.
Yeah, because we think that beauty is subjective.
Yeah.
And that there are no objective means to appreciate it. And that's a problem that you have to overcome, because if it's not pretty, then what's it worth?
Or even objective means to evaluate it.
Right. What are
right.
And there's some art that just defies that altogether. I saw a Bernini's sculptures in Rome at the Gallery of Borghese a few weeks ago, and there's no way you can't appreciate that. It's just so amazing what he was able to do with a block of stone, because you just don't. For one thing, you just don't see that much, and that's one thing. That's easier to appreciate because it is so astounding that somebody was even able to do that at all.
Yeah.
But then you look at, there's so many other things and paintings that you don't know how to judge them. You don't have any criteria that you can come to them with, and that's getting the intellect involved, obviously, but you have no tools to do it with. And if you just could, if I've been to so many museums when I was growing up, when we were in school, we'd take field trips, but I had no means to judge anything by. And so what? It's not fulfilling if you don't have something to bring to it yourself.
Yeah. I mean, the simple observation, you talk about Bernini, his Apollo and Daphne, which I think is in the Borghese. Just the simple observation that the composition's based on a spiral. That it's two figures, and those two figures are moving around each other, according to curving lines, describing a spiral. And just giving students that, and then giving them, being able to contrast that with another work of art that is based more on straight lines than it is on curved lines. It opens up that whole world. Yeah.
It's very complicated thing to me, in the same way that we try to teach students what good literature is, and that we can, even though we don't maybe like a particular genre, like, I don't like the fantasy genre, but Tolkien is just, every sentence is masterful.
Mm-hmm.
But to teach them that by just exposing them to really good things, but I feel like teaching art, can you do that in a year? Can you teach them enough in a year that they can go to a museum? Of course, everything hanging in a museum, right, should be quality, should be. I mean, it's just
don't
art.
assume that.
Yeah.
Art just seems so subjective to me. What is my idea of beautiful versus your idea of beautiful? And there could be two totally different things, just like literature also. But art to me seems more difficult.
Yeah, that's true. That's often a question I get on day one with students is like, but hold on, wait a minute. Like, isn't this just opinion? And I do love to engage with students on that. And we can, I mean, if the conversation goes there. But I will say too, one way to sidestep that whole question is also, I mean, there's a reason I've entitled my guide A Classical History of Art. My intention there was like, look, in a classical school, the way we teach art history should be as classical as everything else that we do. And so what does that mean? I think it means that we're prioritizing classical art, right? Just, I mean, if you want to say just for the reason that, personally, I would prioritize classical art because I think it's best, right? And that's a different conversation. But if just for the reason of being a classical school, we prioritize classical art because it fits with our goals, then that gives you a means of saying, like, well, okay, we need to figure out what classical art is. We need to define that, and then we're using that as a measure for everything else. So, we might not be looking at a Picasso and saying good, bad, but we can certainly look at a Picasso and say it's not classical, right? He's doing something
totally different.
Let's camp out there. What does distinguish classical art from some other piece?
Yeah. That's a great question. That's a big question.
Oh, okay.
Well,
that's the course.
Yeah. Well,
buy the book.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of to understand what the Greeks did that mattered is necessary to understand what Picasso did and why it was so
different,
significant, and so different.
See,
but also significant, right? So it's different. Yeah. It's not classical,
right? But
why is it significant?
Yeah.
What makes it significant?
What Picasso did? So one thing that happens in the modern world and that distinguishes modern art from classical is modern art is quite often, maybe always, art about art. Traditionally,
it's derivative in
yes. Yeah. Traditionally, through human history, art has always been about something, usually something sacred. So usually something that the artist feels is greater than they are, and they're aspiring, they're reaching up to it. And so you need the artifice as a means of imagining and in getting our imaginations into that which is beyond us.
But the goal is representative, isn't it? I mean, you're trying to represent something in whatever artistic form you're working in.
Right. That's right.
Whereas a lot of modern art is not trying to show you the way it is. It's trying to show you the way the artist sees it, which is not, in many cases, is not the way it is.
That's
it's
right.
non-representative, right?
Yeah. Which in itself is a comment about art. For an artist to say, this isn't about the thing that I'm painting, this is about how I see it, is more of a comment on being an artist than it is a comment on what the artist is looking at. So modern art is very often art about art. Traditional art is art about something greater than, something higher
than the artist.
Yeah. I think that's a helpful distinction.
Yeah. And one other thing about this, I have noticed in visiting schools, classical schools, that the least classical of the programs that they offer are art and music. And isn't that a shame? art is not taught in any kind of way that you're teaching anything else. It's a completely different set of principles. It's just
it could be if they used Kyle's classical history of art.
Well, and he's talking about the history, though. I'm talking like when they, do art projects. There's nothing classical about it at all. This is just like any modern art program, and we don't think this is important. We don't think it's important enough to do the right way. I think is really part of the problem.
Yeah.
It became an extracurricular.
Yeah, it became an extracurricular thing.
Or fine arts.
Yeah, where as if beauty was not as important as the true and the good.
Right.
And we tend to put it in the lower grades too.
Yes.
Which I think is the reverse of what it. Not that we shouldn't have art study in the lower grades, but just we prioritize art when they're young, and then it kind of goes away when they get old. I think it should be exactly the opposite. The study of art is really, I think it's helpful to think about it as really the proving ground. If classical education is formation of character, not just knowledge, but the formation of character, then the test is whether or not the student truly, themselves truly enjoys what's good and what's true and what's beautiful. Do they themselves delight in it? And that can be practiced better in an art history course, I think, than any other.
Yeah, and I think what they need to do is in 7th or 8th grade, give them a block of marble, a hammer and a chisel, and if they don't make something beautiful by 12th grade, they don't get their diploma.
That's right.
I mean,
hard-hitting guidelines from Mr. Cochran.
And my students complain about the master copy assignment.
Really? Well, that's actually a good segue, because I've been wondering, what do you do with a student who just is not moved?
Yeah.
Because and maybe like a second question is, can you teach that, or is it just?
So you can teach it. I think because it's Martin, as you were saying, seeing a Bernini sculpture. The sculpture speaks for itself. It's hard not to be impressed. Because great art does speak for itself. It is teachable. It's a question of getting the student to see what's there. And once they do see what's there,
to know what to look for.
Right. Yeah. To know what to look for, to see what's there. And once that happens, it will move them. But yeah, I mean, every year I have students that are dragging their feet. They're just not interested. And I do think it's almost a thing that I hate to admit as a teacher, because it feels like it is a failure, right? But if a student doesn't want to learn, it's very hard to get them to be especially emotionally moved by the thing you're trying to teach them. So yes, it can be taught if the student wants to know it, if the student's looking for it.
The student needs to be open to it.
Right.
And hopefully by 12th grade, our students are open. That's why it's the capstone senior.
Isn't that the case with every subject? Certainly the case with literature. I mean, you teach them literature, and then they do not appreciate Gatsby. Sometimes it takes a while.
Yeah.
Even for otherwise intelligent adults.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too.
I appreciate that.
That's the thing too. And I think this is probably many of us, but me personally, I can look back on my own education and my own behavior in a classroom where teachers were trying to teach me meaningful things. And I can look at the fact that I came around 5, 10 years, 15 years later, to what they were trying to show me. So yeah, you plant the seeds.
Yeah, we do the best we can. And then we just hope that those seeds sprout a little along the way, and that there's some good memory of it. But Kyle is teaching them Dante at the same time that he's teaching them an appreciation of art.
Yeah.
So those two things to me are those are the things we're sending them off with. I mean, that is the culmination of their classical education.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fitting. From at least Purgatorio on, maybe all the way through, the Divine Comedy is about beauty. It's Dante's pursuit of beauty. So, yeah.
Can you?
Nice.
What'd you say?
Nice.
Oh, yeah. Can you teach someone good taste?
Yes.
Really?
I hope so.
I think
because that's what we're trying to do.
I do think so. I think, yes, by putting good things in front of them and explaining to them why they're good, showing them why they're good. And I think having them actually attempt it themselves I think that's a huge thing that really makes them think about how difficult it is. And will they they learn 80 pieces of art in this class, correct? I think there are 80 flashcards.
80 art cards, yeah.
So 80 pieces of art. They're not going to like all of them, but hopefully they will appreciate why you chose those 80.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I always think of like people I know who know wine well, and you think surely that's subjective.
Yeah.
No, even that. And
Everything
you
has
talk to these
rules.
sommeliers who can tell you where the grapes were grown. They can even tell you what year the wine, and that cannot be subjective. If you can tell those things, then it's not purely subjective. So to me, that's my mental analogy for this kind of anything like this is wine tasting and getting to know wine.
And that's a good example because wine is a thing that has a great deal of depth and dimension. There isn't a word for a connoisseur of milkshakes, right? Because it's a sugar hit. That's about it, right? So yeah, it's art is the same way that great art is a deeper and more complex thing than lesser art or art that is just immediately pleasing or art that students are inclined to just immediately like and enjoy. Great art, which is a little bit of a reach most of the time, they have to learn to appreciate it. They have to learn it because it's a more complex and deep thing that can be understood with some degree of depth. Yeah. Actually, an example of that, kind of the classic example, Marcel Duchamp's The Fountain, which is a urinal signed. Was it R. Mutt, I think is the name that he signs it with, and submitted as a museum piece, submitted as a work of art, and it's a famous work of art. It's significant in that it changed a whole lot in the course of art and the history of art, but that can't be understood with any degree of depth. It at best it's a joke, right? And you kind of look at it and you go,
Didn't he mean it as sort of a commentary on what the art industry had become, that you could submit a urinal and sign it, and that would be considered a form of art, and they bid on it. Yeah, I mean,
well, and exactly. It's art about art, like I was saying before, and it's a punchline at best, and you put that up next to never do put that up next to a Bernini sculpture, but if you put that next to, if you did. Next to a sculpture by Bernini, it would just immediately be clear that Bernini is doing more. There is more to appreciate there than a punchline, than a rude, it's potty humor, right? It's bathroom humor.
Well, it's cleverness.
Yeah.
But it's not artistic skill.
That's right. Yeah. So it speaks to a part of humanity that is lower than our
it's a social
faculties.
And that in Duchamp's case, it's a social commentary. Right. That's not what art is. Yeah. I mean, it can do that. But that's not what's central to it.
Yeah. So I think good taste then is teaching students to discern that, to know the difference between their lower impulses and their higher faculties, and to see the art that speaks to the higher thing.
Right, and we see that also in food. You have food that is. You go to a really good restaurant and you eat a meal that is prepared in a certain way, and everything that's on the plate is the right thing that goes with that main thing, and you know the difference between that and a Big Mac. Okay, a Big Mac. It's not that Big Mac doesn't taste good, but there is something different about it. It's a cheap hit. Like you're saying. About was it milkshakes or whatever? Yeah. I mean, and so there are many things that we do where we employ the kind of skill that you're talking about. We do it all the time, but we just don't want to put the effort. I think this does involve more effort because you have to go and seek it. There's not a Bernini upstairs in the building here. You got to go seek it, but it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah,
makes sense. If there's an adult tuning in. So they're not about to be in 12th grade at HLS, who says, I would love to learn more. I would love to start down a journey of understanding classical art, where would you point them? What resources?
Yeah. So Kenneth Clark.
That was exactly, yes,
Okay.
Kenneth Clark.
So what is that?
I get a reputation every single year that I teach this class that every time I bring up Kenneth Clark, after a few times, the students start rolling their eyes. He's just so good. He's so clear and accessible. So he did a television series called Civilization. Not to be confused, they did a modern remake called Civilizations, plural, which, yeah.
But it's not Kenneth Clark.
No.
Not by Kenneth Clark. Right. Yeah.
No, you need Kenneth Clark.
Yeah. So it's Kenneth Clark, Civilization, singular. And it's just wonderful. It's a good source to get a general overview of Western art. What are the big pieces? What are the major movements or the major talking points about each period?
Chronologically.
Right. Yeah. That's a great source.
And just to point this out, there's a book out, Civilization, now, but that was originally a television series that PBS ran, and they kept running it and rerunning it all throughout my growing up. And who introduced you to Kenneth Clark?
If I recall, it was Mr. Martin Cawthorn.
Oh, gosh. Oh, goodness.
Pointing it out.
Yes, I get that. I had to watch it. I had to watch them in college in my humanities, freshman
You
and
had to
sophomore.
watch them?
The
Yes.
Civilization courses?
Had to watch them. Well, it was part of our 2 years of humanities where we started at the beginning and went all the way
So
through.
did my wife. They apparently
Yes.
use this a lot in college, like with college freshmen.
And we had to watch those videos of Kenneth Clark.
Now they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I wonder if my university is still using
I
it. You
seriously
don't think
doubt it.
so?
No, that is all very déclassé right now.
I don't know. They don't have mixed, they don't have co-ed dorms.
Well.
They're still pretty conservative.
Mhm.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe.
And then you were going on to a second point.
No, yeah. So the second one, and this might be a little bit more, might feel a little bit more obscure, but it's actually an instruction book for aspiring painters. But if you're not an aspiring painter, it is still profoundly helpful. I'm not a painter, but I found it very helpful. It is Harold Speed's The Practice and Science of Drawing, which
Ooh.
to my knowledge is still in print. And he's I think in the 1920s, a traditional British painter. And this instruction book is, if you want to know what painters and sculptors are thinking about when they design a work of art, what are they after? What are they trying to accomplish? So, we'll use a famous example, The School of Athens by Raphael. Everyone knows that painting. Everyone loves to talk about who's who in that painting. Who's Pythagoras, who's Ptolemy, who's, et cetera, et cetera. But what is Raphael thinking about when he's painting that? He's thinking about a lot more than just who's who. He's thinking about composition, arrangement of the different groups. He's thinking about the architecture in the background. He's thinking about light and shadow and all of that stuff. So if you want to know more about that, if you want just a very clear and accessible guide to those principles of design, what's the difference between a vertical straight line and a curved line in a painting? How do those two different lines communicate different meanings to the viewer? I think that's the book that I would recommend. Practice and Science of Drawing.
Your discussion of the School of Athens, it sounds like you're assuming that the intention of the artist matters.
I think it does.
Which is another thing that's not fashionable anymore.
Yeah, no, it's not. No, but I mean, in as far as the painting is created intelligently, it's designed on purpose, then we should be.
What is the purpose?
Right,
It's
exactly.
The legitimate question to ask.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Rapid fire. Anybody can answer. I hope you all do. What is the piece of art that has influenced you or moved you the most?
I have an answer to that.
I haven't thought about that. You do have an answer.
Yeah. Well, it was when I was reading intently Harold Speed's Practice and Science of Drawing that I went to the Detroit Institute of Art. We lived at the time, my wife and I lived near there. It's like about 20 minutes away. So we go there all the time. And I was standing in front of John Singleton Copley's Watson and the Shark, and just gazing at it, as you should, for extended period of time, looking at the painting. and I started to see the artist's use of compositional lines, and then something clicked. All right, I saw what he was doing with the lines, and then I saw, I had that one of those aha moments of, that's what he's communicating in this painting. That line is right there because it's parallel to this other line, which draws these two figures into some kind of relationship. And it clicked, and that meant a lot to me, obviously, in the trajectory of my relationship with art. So, yeah, Watson and the Shark.
And I'm thinking, well, so what
I've
is?
never even heard of that.
I'm thinking, what image has been in my mind since, maybe for most of my life. But you know what it is? It's a painting by N.C. Wyeth, and it's on the cover of The Boy's King Arthur, and it's the night, and he's sitting under a tree with a horn hanging from the tree, and he's just sitting there guarding.
Yeah.
And I just, for some reason, I think about that sometimes. I don't know why. I don't know what it exactly means, but it's somebody is standing guard.
Yeah. That's one of the fun things about teaching art history. That happens frequently. A lot of these famous works of art become kind of iconic in culture, and they're used on book covers and things. So the Dying Warrior from the Temple of Apphia, it's a Greek sculpture. It's just on every, Greek language curriculum and things like that. It just shows up all over the place. So that happens a lot where you're looking at a painting and you know it from a book cover.
Yeah. What does it do to your life that particular image haunts it?
Yeah.
I don't have a particular, I don't know. There's a painting that, like Martin, that is on my mind a lot. But I don't know who painted it. I don't know how famous it is, but it is a painting of King Arthur standing and Guinevere prostrate on the floor after he has discovered her betrayal of him. And also, in the background of my mind is that betrayal of Lancelot as well, his best friend. So, I think that's an emotional appreciation. I think the moments, the best moment of art appreciation for me, honestly, and I've talked about this and you all have no idea what I'm talking about, is this little church Dave and I went into in Edinburgh with this painting of this. It was just like a white curtain, and it was all in this dark church, and it just lit up this one wall in a side chapel. It's not even the main. And I just stared at it. I took pictures of it from every different angle, but it's literally nothing but it honestly looks like a shroud. And I don't know what the artist, I've never heard of that artist. I can't remember the name now, but it really moved me. But as far as an actual art experience, my best art experience was in the d'Orsay Museum, because I'm a huge Van Gogh fan, and they have a lot of Van Gogh there. It's like a floor of all Van Gogh.
Well, it
love
brings
those
up
brilliant colors.
It brings up the question, what are the things that we want to furnish the minds of our children with? What are the objects that we want them pondering? And I don't know what the night standing on guard has done for me, but it's done something for me that I think is good.
Yeah.
And so what do we want to put there? What do we want to hang on the walls of our children's minds?
Yeah, that's great. I've got 5 boys, young, and oldest is 11. But I've got a print of Watson and the Shark on the wall at home, framed.
I've got to go look that up.
Because for this same reason, I want my children to grow up with that image somewhere in their imaginations. Yeah.
When my kids were little, the Rembrandt exhibit came to the Speed here. And so we were classically educating. So I took them, and Tyler was probably 8. And so we're standing there. The place is crowded. You had to have tickets to get in. And we're standing there, and it's hushed. And all of a sudden he screams out in his 8-year-old voice, this is so boring. And I could have killed him. So then we go on past Rembrandt and we get out of there. And then just the regular art that's in the speed. I don't know who did this, but there was this painting and I saw him just standing there just with his eyes wide open and his mouth hanging open. And it was a picture of David with Goliath's head on a stick.
Yeah.
That was what he appreciated at that point.
I'm with him on this.
But there is hope. There is hope because then he took what we were then calling art and architecture with Michelle Luoma as a senior, and it was art piece after art piece after art piece. She would put it up on the wall, talk about it, and he told me after he graduated, like he was a couple years into college, and he said that was the absolute best class. And I thought he cares nothing about classical art, but she gave that to him. That was a gift that she gave to him and that HLS gave to him was that appreciation that will just make a huge difference in his life. So he doesn't have to look at David with Goliath's head on us. I mean, he's been exposed to so much more. And that's all we can do.
That's right. That's right. Well, that's a good note to end on. Thank you for being here. And Kyle, thanks for taking some time out of your day.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Your classical history of art is on the Memoria Press website. There are lots of pieces that go along with it. We mentioned the flashcards.
Right.
There's a whole
and
set.
There's a student book and a teacher book, a teacher guide, and a text.
No text. It's
all together.
Yeah.
The text and the workbook are in one piece.
Yeah. And then the videos as well.
Yes.
Oh,
that's
and the videos, which are Mr. Janke.
The talented. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for being with us, Kyle. And thank you for joining us. We will be back next time. Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.